Hey, this is Morgan Pratt with the JMac for Congress campaign. If you're listening to this podcast, sounds like you like JMac. You can find out more about him by going to his Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube channel. Please remember to subscribe and rate us. Now coming up, more JMac.
Hello there, and welcome into another edition of the JMac podcast. So glad that you are with us. And as Morgan said, please like us, subscribe to our podcasts, and let everybody else know about them as we get the word out that I'm still behind the microphone, even though I am running for Congress. How could I stay away from the microphone? An impossibility after being a talk radio show host for 20 years. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and for your support. Today's topic, not going to be about politics or about government. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about marriage.
Marriage is what brings us together today. Marriage, that blessed arrangement, that dream within a dream.
Now, you might be asking, why in the world are you talking about marriage? Well, a lot of the things that we do on this podcast are based upon requests from you. And I have been married for 28 years. It does not make me an expert, but for whatever reason, because of my upbringing, I don't live inside a box. I don't live inside of kind of the traditional. So I have the ability to look at things from the outside in. So every time I would share a marriage story or marriage advice on my show on KSL News Radio, I would get requests from people. They're like, J-Mac, can I get a transcript of what you just said? And so finally, I got tired of trying to repeat what I said, typing it up on social media, and I just wrote it down in a book. And that book is called Joyful Union. And I didn't write the book to become famous or to become wealthy. I wrote it because of an honest desire to help if people saw or felt that the ideas that I was sharing would have a positive impact on themselves and their marriage. So again, the book is called Joyful Union. We'll put a link to it in the description for this podcast. Morgan will take care of that. And it's a pretty quick read. And I just get right to it. If you're thinking about getting married, if you're engaged, I talk about that. If you are in a marriage and you are struggling, I talk about that. And one of the core things about marriage is the misconception about where love comes from. And this is something that I want to share in today's podcast. There is this perception, and it's a lie. I'm telling you right now, it is a lie. It is a complete myth that there is a soulmate for you out there, that there's only one person for you on the face of this earth. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a single second. In fact, I believe that the history of humanity shows that you can love anybody that you serve. Anybody. Anybody that you express an attitude towards where you're taking care of them, where you're doing things for them, where you're going out of the way for them. This is somebody that you have the potential to love. And what happens, and we forget about this, is that when you're dating, you're both focusing on the needs of the other person. This courtship process that you call it, we don't really use that terminology anymore. But during the dating process, you're buying flowers and you're complimenting each other and you're dressing nicely for each other, doing everything you can to impress and take care of the other side. No wonder you have the potential to fall in love. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to fall in love with everybody. I do believe that there's something to chemistry and to compatibility. But I also know that there are people who are in love and married who are not compatible at all. I would classify my own marriage as such. My wife and I came from two different sides of the track. And I'll just put it in different terms, okay? She was a cheerleader. I was in the band. I mean, what more do you need to know about how different we really are? And I married up. But what's funny is that we think that love comes from just, it's like this instant thing, and you'll just know it when you feel it, and you'll love somebody. And we completely forget all of the actions that we go through when we're falling in love with somebody. We'll spend hours on the phone just talking to each other. We'll go out on dates and do all of these things and just be together and be so hypersensitive and worried about what the other person is thinking about us. And then we get into marriage, and what happens? The long discussions disappear, the buying flowers disappear, the spending enormous amounts of time together disappears, and we get shocked and amazed when those feelings of love disappear. They disappear because we stop doing things, not because love is like this virus that you catch and then you have it for a while and then eventually you become immune to it. It's very easy to fall in love with somebody else outside of your marriage if you start following the same process that you follow to fall in love with your current spouse. And this is what people don't understand. It's actually easier to be in that courtship. It's more exciting. It's fun. It's electric. But you think that those things are missing from your marriage because it just faded away. But that's not what faded away. What faded away was those things that you were doing during your dating. That's what left you. And if you return to those things, you might be shocked and amazed to find out that you can still be in love with somebody after 28 years of marriage. You can still be madly, passionately in love with them after 28 years of marriage. And there is, in my opinion, there is a mechanism to marriage. There is a machinery. It's a formula. And the way I describe this formula is as follows. You'll never get what you want out of marriage by focusing on what you want out of marriage. You'll only get what you want out of marriage by focusing on what your spouse wants out of marriage. Now, let me explain. If you are in a place in your relationship now, in your marriage, where you are saying, my needs are not being met, then you're in the complete wrong place. And you need to snap out of it, and you need to reverse your thinking. Because it's like a pendulum, okay? For lack of a better way to describe it. When somebody, let me ask you this. When somebody does something nice for you, what do you feel towards them? Do you feel anger towards them? No. Do you feel compassion towards them? Yes. Do you feel empathy towards them? Yes. Do you feel love towards them? Yes. Do you feel a desire to reciprocate? Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, you are not so far gone that when somebody does something nice for you, that you still feel a desire to reciprocate. So think about that. Think about a marriage where you're struggling and you're both in a place where you're thinking about your own needs instead of the needs of your significant other. What if you pulled out of that and you said, I'm going to do something nice for my spouse, something that I know that they need, something that I know that they want, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to stop thinking about what I need for a minute. And so you're going to grab that pendulum and you're going to push it towards them with a good deed, with some type of service. And it has to be something that you know is important to them. Maybe it's doing the dishes. Maybe it's making the bed. Maybe it's asking them out on a date on Friday night. Well, you know what it is. If you've been with your significant other for any amount of time, you know exactly what they need. If you don't, then the first step would be to sit down and figure out what they need from marriage, what things they would appreciate, okay? So here you are, you're in a struggling relationship, and you decide, I'm going to stop thinking about myself for a minute, and I'm going to do something nice for my significant other. What emotions will your significant other feel when you've done something nice for them? We've already talked about it. They'll feel love. They'll feel appreciated. They'll feel that you care about them, and they'll feel a need to reciprocate. Now, hopefully, they are the kind of person that does reciprocate. Now, they may not do it at once. You may have to send that pendulum to them 5 or 6 times before they start to turn around and send it back in your direction. But the machinery or the formula, the equation behind a strong, passionate marriage is when both sides of the equation are sending the pendulum back to the other side by doing nice things, by spending time together, by saying nice things, by focusing on those things that you did during a courtship. Imagine a marriage where each side, a couple of times a day, focuses on the needs of the other person in the relationship. This is when the machinery works, and it works forever. It works throughout the entire marriage. Marriages break down when either both sides are thinking about themselves or one side is thinking about themselves. So you may find yourself in a place where you've sent that pendulum over to them hundreds of times, and no matter what you do, they will not reciprocate. Well, in that case, you may need more. It's time for counseling. It's time for outside help, something. But in the early stages, at least, hopefully you find yourself in a place where if you spend your time focusing on them and they spend their time focusing on you, you can have an amazingly wonderful, passionate, loving, and caring relationship. Remember, you can't get what you need out of marriage by focusing on what you need out of marriage. You can only get what you need out of marriage by focusing on what your spouse needs out of marriage. This is the magic and the wonder of a true and long-lasting relationship. This is why you fall in love when you're courting and why you fall out of love once you get into marriage. And it's one of the reasons, by the way, why you love your children so much, because every parent spends a huge amount of time serving and loving and caring for their children, doing it selflessly, not focusing on themselves. I believe that it's impossible to hate those whom you serve. And think about that. Impossible to hate those whom you serve. Serve your spouse, and they will be much more likely to serve you. This is the formula for a strong relationship. I hope that is helpful. Again, if you've been in that circumstance and you've tried, it doesn't work for everybody. But if you can identify this process early on in your marriage and be heads up about it with each other and focus on it with each other, I promise you it can take you from newlyweds to a 50-year anniversary, where after 50 years, you still love being together and you are still madly in love with each other because you focus on the other person's needs. That's what marriage is. Two sides leaning towards each other and focusing on each other. It's wonderful. Again, Morgan will put the link to the book, Joyful Union, in the link to this podcast. I hope that you take a look at it. It's got a lot of great information, but again, a really quick and easy read, but ideas and practices that you can put in place today to make a huge difference in your marriage. So check it out.
Thanks for listening to the JMac podcast. If you'd like to donate to JMac for Congress, you can go to jmacforutah.com. That's jmacforutah.com.